Now, I have to say, both of you, I feel a bit foolish this morning because for weeks, if not months, I have been saying that Gladys Berejiklian is the most sensible premier in the nation, that she has not fallen into the lockdown traps of so many other states, that she has wanted to keep Sydney, the engine room of the Australian economy, going, where premiers like Dan Andrews have been content to lock down their states, paying big bucks to the public servants who vote for him while letting private businesses suffer. Well, more fool me, because yesterday, Gladys Berejiklian did this.
From 6 p.m. today, all of Greater Sydney, the Blue Mountains, the Central Coast and Wollongong will go into a lockdown with stay-at-home orders in place until midnight, Friday the 9th of July. So essentially, a fortnight from midnight yesterday, all of Greater Sydney, the Blue Mountains, Central Coast and Wollongong will go into lockdown with stay-at-home provisions.
That's right, all of Sydney and surrounds under house arrest, lockdown with just 4 reasons to leave your house, which is incidentally 3 more than the number of people in hospital with the dreaded coronavirus, and it is 4 more than the number of COVID cases that we will be allowed in New South Wales if we want the government to take the handcuffs off.
Given we are aiming to get to no community transmission, and as we roll out the vaccine, it is important that we get to that as quickly as possible.
Now, Australia has done a great job with the coronavirus, but I think we cannot keep living like we are in 2020 and locking down and opening up over and over again over a handful of cases and even fewer hospitalizations. Caleb, I remember when we were talking about 2 weeks to flatten the curve. What do you reckon about what's happening up here?
I can barely remember when we were talking about 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It feels like that was 2 decades ago now. And in reality, it was just over a year ago. It was 2 weeks, we'll fix all of this up, life will go back to normal. And here we are, some 14 months later, we are still in and out of lockdowns. Gladys, who we've sat here and said, is the only premier in the country who seemed to have a sensible take on all of this, who was actually a decent manager of coronavirus, has wet the bed, joined the rest of the premiers in going into lockdown, despite the fact that there is no evidence yet that this Delta strain, the Indian strain of COVID, is actually more dangerous. I mean, all they're talking about is the fact that it is more transmissible. But so what? I mean, there are lots of things that are heavily transmissible, like conjunctivitis, for instance. I mean, you've only got to touch a doorknob that someone else has had it and you get conjunctivitis, right? That doesn't mean that it's going to kill you. You look at the number of people in hospital at the moment with COVID in this country, next to none. And yet, we are still going into lockdowns over this dreaded virus. We've got people vaccinated, mind you, not everyone. We're going a bit slow on that, and that's another discussion entirely. But we cannot continue on this merry-go-round. Every single time we go into a lockdown, it hurts people, it hurts business, it makes recovering from coronavirus even worse. And we've done so well, particularly economically, in the wake of coronavirus. We had a very small recession, and we bounced back from that exceedingly well, much better than probably most any other country in the world. But every single one of these lockdowns threatens that. And I'm so disappointed that Gladys Berejiklian has joined the bedwetters in going into lockdown. But at least I can say that one of those 4 things that you're allowed to leave the house for is to go to the bottle shop, because God knows you're going to need some liquor to get through this 2 weeks holed up at home. I saw your photo of your bar cart at home, James, and mine looks very similar, I have to say. But not to gloat, but I'm in a state that hasn't been in a lockdown since November. So I might be doing a little better than you at the moment, but by God, I know you're going to need that booze.
I think that that bar cart's going to be looking a little lighter at the end of these 2 weeks, but very well said, Caleb. And I have to say, you mentioned the Indian variant. But, guys, I've also got some concerns about how we seem to be suffering from a strain here in Australia that feels more like it's the East German variant. Yesterday, New South Wales Health Minister Brad Hazzard said this: the Deputy Commissioner of Police has made clear that police have been tasked to be on the lookout for any vehicles that may have come from the Greater Sydney area. And I remind you that they have all sorts of technology these days, including recognition of number plates. And he said that people in small communities will let police know if tourists arrive. Now, are we really Daisy, in this state now with coronavirus, where we are encouraging and seeing the authorities encourage people to dob on somebody who may have come from out of town, a town that has 4 or 5 million people in it. And as we can see, a few dozen cases of coronavirus, almost all of whom are isolating. Daisy, this is looking kind of sinister here, isn't it?
Sinister is certainly the word for it. And can I say, I'm totally in agreement with the two of you that I am so disappointed in Gladys Berejiklian on her actions regarding this handful of cases of COVID in Sydney. I mean, for goodness sake, as you mentioned, not only are only a very small amount of people sick and in hospital, all but about 3 cases have been linked to existing cases, and about half of them are in isolation. This is not what you would call uncontrolled spread, and even if it is, it doesn't look like anyone is particularly sick and dying, touch wood in this case. So I am so disappointed, particularly as someone who lives in Queensland, who originally was from Sydney. I'd look at my home state of New South Wales and think, oh, how wonderful New South Wales has it right. This is fabulous, a beacon of hope for Queenslanders to aspire to. But no, Gladys has gone down the alarmist route. Like everyone, she's caved to the pressure, and I am quite disgusted. And as for this terminology that Brad Hazzard is using in a sort of military sense about the virus and getting people to dob on each other, one of the things that I loathe is when premiers and chief health officers and ministers for health talk about the virus like it's human, like it has a brain. And in Victoria, they were calling it a beast and saying it was cunning and all those kind of things. I hate it. It makes me want to vomit. I think we're in a really difficult place at the moment in Australia, and it is devastating because I thought we were coming out of this mentality, but apparently I was mistaken.
Well, Daisy, I'm so glad you mentioned people thinking that this, virus has some sort of superhuman intelligence, because I want to also read you what Brad Hazzard had to say yesterday. He also said, and I think he was putting his Napoleon hat on here, he said, quote, "No matter what defensive steps we are taking at the moment, the virus seems to understand how to counterattack in different locations." I mean, what a joke, guys. Yeah. I feel like, it's only a matter of time before we have the Brad Hazzard downfall videos coming out, where he's talking about this, like, Rommel being surrounded, or, Sydney has turned into the Stalingrad of coronavirus.